Let's take a look at what shamanism is, both in the past and in the present. Shamanism is a very ancient practice that involves a shaman or practitioner reaching altered states of consciousness in order to encounter and interact with the spirit world. A shaman is a person regarded as having access to and influence in the world of benevolent and malevolent spirits. Shamans typically practice healing and divination while in a trance state induced by ritual. We know that shamanism is at least 70,000 to as much as 140,000 years old, and perhaps older. Archaeologists have found remains of some stone circles hidden inside practically inaccessible caves that date back to the age of the Neanderthals. So the practice of shamanism in contemporary culture is based upon and rooted in traditions that span millennia of spiritual searching and teaching. It is clear, though, that all these thousands of years ago, shamanism was very different. We cannot go back in time to see what shamanism may have looked like in the beginning. It is only by examining current shamanic societies, especially those that have not been significantly influenced by modern culture, that we can make some guesses. One of the striking observations about shamanism is that it seems to have sprung into being across the planet at about the same time. It does not seem to have migrated from one culture or location to the next. Archaeologists find evidence of shamanic practices in Indonesia, in Mongolia, in Siberia, in Central and Northern Asia, in Oceania, Africa, and Australia, and also in Europe. The Americas also have deep shamanic histories, which may be more aligned with human migration than other areas. However, even these go back tens of thousands of years. Anthropologists continue to make finds that push the date of earliest human settlement in the Americas back hundreds or even thousands of years. Archaeological evidence found in graves and drawings on cave walls, especially but not exclusively in Europe, offer indications that shamanism started during the Paleolithic era. Early anthropological studies theorize that shamanism developed as a magic practice to ensure a successful hunt or gathering of food. It is likely that shamanic rituals were done to either locate herds or draw them toward the hunters. Of course, we do not know for certain. However, following the evidence and studying more recent shamanic cultures and tribes helps us to understand some of the burial artifacts and cave paintings that we have found. The first writings about shamans appears about 500 years ago in letters from conquistadors in Central America. Shamans were viewed then as being frauds or even devils. That view of shamans and their admittedly odd behaviors continued in various forms until the later 1800s. When anthropology was developed as a social scientific area of study, anthropologists traveled the world to collect information about other cultures. Initially, these early scientists viewed shamans through the same lens as priests and secular explorers before them had. However, as the science changed and their observational skills developed, anthropologists began to see something different. They noticed that virtually every primary level tribe all over the world had some form of shamanic teacher and healer as an integral part of their culture. Of course, they were not called shamans. The name for the role varied by language, so it was difficult for anthropologists to compare findings. Eventually, the Tungusk word shaman was adopted, and it is still in use today. That is why we refer to these individuals as shamans. The word has found its way into our language. That is the scientific overview of shamans. Now, let's look more closely at who a shaman is, how they become shamans, and what they do in practice. First, let's look at how indigenous shamans are trained. Of course, the process is different from tribe to tribe and according to the needs of the tribe. However, there is a fundamental process of training. The training of an indigenous shaman begins early, often as a child. The elders or current shaman, or even the tribal community itself, may recognize a child as in some way special. If it is determined that the child is or might become a shaman, the apprenticeship begins. The current shaman begins teaching the apprentice on a daily basis. Sometimes the child is even taken to live with the shaman. Some shamans report that the training continues not only during the day, but in dreams as well. Such is the intensity of teaching because there is much the apprentice needs to know. This process goes on for many years. Eventually, the elder shaman dies, and the apprentice becomes the new shaman. Another person is identified as a future shaman, and the cycle continues. Shamans have many roles in tribal life. They are responsible for the health and well-being of both the individuals and the tribe as a whole. This usually includes both physical and spiritual well-being. In addition, they are the ceremonialists and officiants, holding ceremonies and rituals as part of their service. They conduct marriages and death rituals. They are the counselors, therapists, and priests for the community. They negotiate with spirits of the land, herds, weather, and more on behalf of the tribe. Shamans are seen as an intermediary between the people and the spirit world, which consists of both benevolent and malevolent spirit beings. It is their task to maintain the balance of the tribe and its members with each other and the world at large, and it is a daunting task, which is why their training and apprenticeship is long and extensive. Our contemporary culture, especially the Euro-American culture, does not provide this kind of support. In many ways, our advanced, industrial society has cut us off from the connection to nature that is needed. While a number of so-called shamanic universities have developed over the past decade or so, it is impossible to replicate that deep shamanic tradition in our current culture. So, what are we to do? Let's turn our attention now to a contemporary view of shamanism. Contemporary shamanism is an effort to try to bring healing based on thousands of years of shamanic practice to our contemporary society. It is an effort to return people to their natural roots, to see the world in a more spiritual way, and to treat the beings of the world with respect. The archaeologist Michael Harner, with his book The Way of the Shaman, brought shamanism to the attention of contemporary thought in the early 1980s. It was based on a broad range of field studies of tribes in many cultures. From his experience, he developed practices in what he called core shamanism. One of his colleagues, a teacher of core shamanism, Sandra Ingerman, developed similar teachings and began her own lineage. She too has become one of many influential Western shamanic teachers. Their differences were basically differences in style rather than the teaching themselves. Other shamanic lineages have also developed with roots in Central and Southern American indigenous traditions. It has been said that the shamans are coming down from the mountains because humanity now desperately needs what they know. So today, there are many teachers and lineages of contemporary shamanic traditions. The difficulty is for the practitioner to hold firmly to the ancient worldview and practices within a culture based on a post-industrial worldview and lots of ego. One does not self-declare himself or herself to be a shaman. Completion of courses in shamanism and shamanic practice also does not qualify anyone to become a shaman. In fact, indigenous shamans would never actually refer to themselves as such. One of my teachers told me that whether someone is or is not a shaman is a decision of the community. Because we in our culture do not have the deep apprenticeship, it is the community that identifies an individual to serve in that capacity as a teacher or healer, or sometimes both. So while our culture does not have what we could refer to as a shamanic tradition, we do have many people who are shamanic practitioners. That is, people who practice shamanism.